Is Meta making money from their open source Llama models? In the past, Mark Zuckerberg had said, selling access to their Llama models is not something they're really looking at doing for a revenue generation perspective. He's like, hey, we're making these things open source to get, feedback from the community. It's more about improving our models to put them on our platform. But recent filings have showed that Meta is indeed making money from selling access to their Llama tools. Again, nothing wrong with this. I'm trying to be transparent. And there's a lot of really interesting things going on in this story. Who is paying them? How much are they making? Why are they making money? Why weren't they making money? How much money are they going to spend on this? We're just kind of doing a meta deep dive today on everything going on with that model. Before we get into that, I wanted to say, if you've ever wanted to grow and scale your professional career or your business using AI tools, I have a school community where every single week I record an exclusive piece of content, an exclusive video I don't post anywhere else, which essentially breaks down all of the tools, processes I use to grow and scale my businesses using AI. So there's a link in the description to my school community. It's called AI Hustle. And in the past, I had this set at about $100 a month. It is currently $19 a month. So if you're interested in joining, I would love to have you. We have over 300 members that share amazing insights from their businesses, what they're working on. And if you ever have questions, they will respond. So an amazing community, and I would love to have you as part of it. Let's get into what's going on with Meta. So the big thing that I mentioned here earlier is that there's a blog post that came out last July from Meta, where essentially Mark Zuckerberg said that, look, we're not really selling access to our model. This isn't really what we're focusing on doing. We just believe that open source is good for the world in general. This is kind of the tone and direction that they took. But we know they're spending insane amounts of money, right? So Mark Zuckerberg also said in January that Meta is going to have 1.3 million GPUs for AI by the end of the year. Now, in contrast, a lot of people were absolutely jaw to the floor awestruck when XAI announced that they had 200,000 of the kind of cutting edge NVIDIA GPUs and that they tied them all together into a massive data center that they whipped up in a few months. This is kind of like this heroic Herculean event that we saw over the last few months. I would say Meta is not going to just be like, oh, wow, look, the newcomer is doing this. They really are going to try to push it to the limit. And it's really proof, I believe, that GPUs do make a difference, that the amount of compute you have does make a difference and it is needed. And so Meta's going to have 1.3 million, but that is a lot of money. Aside from the fact that Mark Zuckerberg says that Meta expects to spend about 60 billion to 80 billion on capital expenditures just this year. Most of that is on data centers and growing their development team. That projected range is about double what they spent last year. So last year they spent 35 to 40 billion dollars. They're looking to do 60 to 80 billion. That is a massive leap. So where are they going to get this money from, aside from obviously their ad revenue business on Facebook? And it would appear that a portion of that may actually be coming from selling access to Llama, which they said wasn't really their thing. But according to some filings, which were submitted by an attorney for a recent lawsuit that Facebook is kind of up in, they may actually be making some money. So if you can go through this whole filing, which is over on courtlistener.com. But the rundown on it is it's a lawsuit between, and it's a copyright lawsuit between Cadre versus Meta, which essentially, this is a really crazy lawsuit. I'm going to break down part of this. Essentially, Meta is being accused of training their AI models, their Llama model, on hundreds of terabytes of pirated ebooks. So essentially, there are pirating websites that have all of these ebooks. Growing up, had many friends with their Amazon Kindles that didn't want to go pay for a book. They would go pirate it off of one of these websites and go read it on their Kindle. And I know everyone's got different ethics about this, and some people are saying, how is it different than the library and whatever. Okay, I'm not getting into all of it, but I would say it's probably pretty evident and pretty clear that a multi-billion-dollar company probably shouldn't be pirating hundreds of terabytes of ebooks. Your friend in high school doing it for their Kindle to go read Moby Dick is kind of I'm less concerned about that. Hundreds of terabytes from Meta is probably not a great thing. So they're being sued about this for this essentially. And what's really interesting to me in this is the lawsuit's going on, and maybe they can't really comment much about this, but TechCrunch wrote a whole article about this, and Meta actually did respond to them and give them like a quote from Zuckerberg for the article. It's just funny because the article literally accuses them of pirating all of these ebooks, and then they're like, okay, yeah, we'll comment, but like they don't really comment on the pirating part. They're like, Zuckerberg said this about like selling access and blah blah blah. So anyways, I'm not saying it's an admission of guilt. They probably just can't comment on the lawsuit specifically, but it just is kind of funny to me. The optics of it in any case are funny. Like they commented on this lawsuit without denying anything was done wrong. Okay, so who's paying them? That's a big question. I'm sure you guys are all wondering. So according to this filing, they don't indicate the specific hosts and how much they are paying Meta, but they do list a bunch of quote unquote host partners in the blog post. So AWS, NVIDIA, Databricks, Grok, Dell, Azure, Google Cloud, and Snowflake. And essentially they're saying developers are not required to use Llama on one of these host partners, right? Like I believe, I'm trying to think, I might actually use AWS to access Llama models on my platform AI Box. But in any case, you can essentially access the models on a different platform, and it makes it super easy. You don't have to self-host these. Now, developers don't have to. They can put this onto their computer. They can run it locally. They can fine-tune it. They could put it on a bunch of different hardware, but it makes it way easier to just grab an API to one of these big companies and run it. If you're a serious software company, to run it that way, it makes it a lot easier. And so this is what a lot of people do. And of course, Meta wants to charge for that. So this would appear to be the way that they are making most of their money. Here's what they said. Zuckerberg said, quote, if you're someone like in an earnings call, right? Because they obviously have to prove like that they're not just bleeding hundreds of billions of dollars on Llama for nothing. He said, if you're someone like Microsoft or Amazon or Google, you're going to basically be reselling these services. That's something that we think we should get some portion of the revenue. So these are the deals that we intend to be making, and we've started doing that a little bit. So this was an earnings call last April when Zuckerberg said this. Evidently, from this lawsuit, it would appear, and what was listed there, it would appear that Meta is making deals. They are charging people. Zuckerberg also said, I think it's a good business for us to do in this way. It makes our product better rather than if we were just on an island building our models that no one was kind of standardizing around in the industry. So he's talking about kind of why they're open sourcing this. Very, very interesting. Likely this is all sort of a portion of offsetting the cost. They're also apparently considering launching a subscription service to Meta AI. So this would also be interesting kind of with their standalone app if they have some sort of premium, which like every other major AI company has. So, no shade at them if they end up doing this. I will be very curious if they can have better models, higher rate limits, more features, access to the internet, whatever. If they add all the other bells and whistles that everyone else is adding and they have some sort of premium thing, I think this could be interesting to have another serious player in this space doing that. Coming to America, I have like this weird adverse reaction. Maybe it's a cultural thing to like super heavy litigation. However, I do love all of the lawsuits because we get so much information out of them. And probably in this case, based off of this lawsuit on Meta, of course, they're allegedly using pirated books to train their model. But also part of the lawsuit is, I guess, the way that they took those pirated books down. I don't know if they did it inadvertently or if it was on purpose, but they actually seeded the pirated books. So they downloaded like hundreds of terabytes or petabytes. But then also, I guess they were seeding them from the servers, meaning that like they were sharing the pirated books for other people to pirate, which is like a mega no-no. So anyways, it'll be very interesting to see what happens here. If Meta gets slapped on the wrist, or if there's some sort of big issue that they have to overcome, big obstacle. I'll break down all of that for you in the future. Thank you so much for tuning in to the AI Applied podcast. We really appreciate you having us having you as a listener. And if you enjoyed the podcast, if you would like to leave us a review, we would really appreciate it. And in addition, if you've ever wanted, like I mentioned, to join the AI Hustle School community or learn how to grow and scale your business or career with AI tools, like I mentioned, there's a link in the description. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will catch you next time.